Hi everyone, I'm Kennan from Cars and Bids, and today's video is a little bit different. I'm here in Newport, Rhode Island at the Audrain Automotive Museum, but there's a catch. Originally, Cars and Bids had sponsored their Young Timers event, which celebrates cars from the 1980s and 1990s, the kind of cars that you see on Cars and Bids. However, due to rain, that event has been canceled, so I won't be able to attend that event tomorrow. But I'm here at the museum today to walk around and talk about some of the cool exhibitions here at the Audrain. So in this video, we're going to get nerdy about some of the cars currently on display, and we'll show you all around the Audrain Automotive Museum. And with that, let's get started. All right, moving on to the museum itself, I'm joined by Dave DeMuzio, who is the curator here at this collection. So not only are we around all these amazing cars, but this space is pretty incredible too. Can you tell me a little bit more about the history behind the space?
Yeah, it's a great place to show cars. The Audrain building was completed in 1903 by Adolphe Audrain, who is a merchant born in California to Parisian parents. Spent most of his career as a decorator, antique dealer, had shops in Paris and New York City, and had a summer home here. And he recognized the need for other trades that catered to wealthy New Yorkers that were here only for 10 weeks a year. They needed a place to have a shop or a studio. And that's why he built this building on speculation, to have so that other people who followed their wealthy New York clientele to Newport for the summer would have a place to set up shop. The first Brooks Brothers a pop-up store outside of New York City was right over in the south corner of this building.
You're kidding.
Dressmakers, jewelers, tailors, Pierce Automobiles had a shop here, as well as Mercedes-Benz and Indian motorcycles. So they were here to provide services and their merchandise to the summer crowd, so to speak. So
amazing. And now you provide excellent exhibitions to the summer crowd.
Well, you can see window, door. We've taken out all the walls, added all the steel, basically opened up the space. And aesthetically, I think of it, we're sort of going for the cross between a boutique and an industrial space. It has that feel to it, I think.
It does. I think you've struck the right balance with that. And of course, all the automotive jewelry really pops, and it's just a wonderful space to spend time in. Of course, it's so centrally located here in Newport. It's just a staple.
Yeah, it's great to be on Bellevue Avenue. Lots of foot traffic here during the season, and we're open all year round. We do well all year round. And of course, since we don't have any real estate around us, we like doing events. Cars and Coffee, our Concours Motor Week, and many other things we do allow us to share the collection with the public. The mission is really about driving as well. So all the cars are kept running. We drive them in and out. When we change exhibitions, we put in a folding door on the far side and literally just drive them up ramps and onto the floor, clean the tires, push them around. The driving experience and sharing that visceral experience with people is also really important. It's hard to do in the gallery. Here, we're really focusing on history and some of the details of the cars, thematically changing exhibitions 4 times a year.
Well, that's wonderful. History and details are my sort of thing. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about some cars.
Sure, great.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, the first car I wanted to talk about, Dave, is this 32 Marmon. Now, obviously, at Cars and Bids, we sell cars from the modern era, so not pre-war stuff, but I am obsessed with Marmons, and I'm obsessed with this car. So can you tell us a little bit about how it ended up in your collection and some of the historical context behind the Marmon? Yeah,
a great car. The accession number, it's fairly early, so we bought it at auction at Pebble Beach. We go every year and enjoy the auctions. Special car. I mean, there are only 6 known LeBaron coupes made for Marmon. It has a very simple but very strong presence. I love the color, but of course the reason we really bought it was to sort of fill that pre-war genre of cars with large engines. So 16-cylinder, a lot of technology. And we were talking earlier, some of the engineers from Cadillac are very involved in this car.
That was my favorite thing. The engineers who started development of the 16-cylinder engine, then poached by Cadillac to go start their 16-cylinder engine.
Yeah.
I've always used that expression too. Good artists copy, great artists steal.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and there was 16-cylinder aluminum block.
It was a huge difference. Everything else was cast iron at that time.
So very, very advanced, and it really I think the whole movement towards 12 and 16-cylinder engines is really about a lot of low-end torque, quiet, efficient, and elegant kind of power that goes with a car like this. Whether it's a 16-cylinder Cadillac or the Marmon, it also a fairly high price point and competing in tough times with the Duesenberg. So You know, there's even an ad, twice the horsepower, half the cost of a Duesenberg. Of course, Duesenberg didn't have a 16-cylinder engine, but it really was playing to that market. A very interesting car, and I think, you know, because of the financial times in the early 30s, didn't do so well, probably would have done a lot better, obviously, if the economy was better.
Exactly.
But
well, that was such an interesting time. The financial crisis at that time, the crash, really ended up killing off a lot of manufacturers and kind of honing them into more of what's around today, honestly.
Yeah.
But cars like this were such a big deal. I mean, 200 horsepower in the 1930s. A car could do over 100 miles an hour, which in the 1930s was just absolutely mind-blowing.
No,
but to your point, you know, I wouldn't necessarily want to be driving. It'd be like seeing, you know, a Veyron or something after the 2008 financial crisis. It was just like, it was a lot. This was a lot of car, very expensive, very powerful, but it was also kind of showing off. It wasn't as showy style-wise as the Duesenberg.
Yeah, but you know, it's a big
car,
huge car for 2 seats. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like what's under the hood is what matters, and that 16-cylinder engine is just unbelievable. And that's why, to me, it's like it's one of the most interesting cars that it's on display. It's just, I'm a huge fan of engines, and at that time, you know, bigger meant better. More displacement, more power, more cylinders. That was the philosophy.
Yeah, one of the best examples. To see it as a coupe is really cool.
No question.
Well. Yeah.
It's a thrill to see it.
Yeah.
The next car I wanted to talk about is this. This is the Buick Y Job, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, it's just another car from the 1950s. This car was made in 1938. So tell us a little bit more about this car, Dave, because it's mind-blowing to me.
It is to me as well. We were so fortunate in 2019 to have a show focusing on GM concept cars. Michael Simcoe, current head of design, very supportive, really got behind us this idea of bringing all these cars to the East Coast from the GM Heritage Collection. We had all the heavy hitters that are, you know, this as well as the Buick LeSabre from '51. If I had to choose one, it would be this, because it's the first American concept car. Harley Earl is hired to start the styling department in the late 20s with experience from Fisher Body Works and the idea of full-size clay modeling, and he had a very interesting way of going about his design process. You know, he basically had this idea for this car, something that was very futuristic. I mean, think about this: 1938. This was on the road when there were dual cow Phaetons and things like the Marmon. It was like a spaceship going down the road, I think, to the point where, you know, we know it was shown in '48 and the press thought it was a new car, and again in '51 they thought it was a new car, when, you know, it was that far ahead of its time. Harley Earl, very interested in this period. You know, there's some Art Deco influence, but it's also low and wide and long.
Very elegant. It's definitely, there's a placement on the emphasis of elegant. And I think the tail that goes down, the boat tail look is so.
And you'll see a picture on the wall. Doesn't look exactly the same. Why? Because it was a daily driver for Harley Earl, and he brought it back to work with new ideas, took it into the shop and said, guys, you know, change this. So the bumpers have changed, some of the spats on the rear quarters have changed. You know, the design evolved as he spent time driving the car. But, you know, it was tremendously influential for Buick. I mean, there's styling features in this car that literally were integrated into newer Buicks for another 15 years. Right. So just
a hugely influential car.
Hugely, and people walk by it thinking, oh, it's an interesting 50s car. No,
it was genuinely 20 years ahead of its time.
No, it was, you know, so for that reason, it's so remarkable.
It's mind-blowing to me, because when I think about cars from that era that were forward-looking, the Accord is the one that usually comes to mind, or slightly post-war, the Tucker, too.
Right.
But even those cars look more akin to that era than this thing does. This thing is still modern, well after this car.
Yeah, the Buick LeSabre comes along in '51, another wonderful Harley Earl design. Same thing. It's way ahead of its time. Yeah. If we had more room, I would have had both in the gallery. Having to choose one.
It's like having to choose between your kids.
Yeah, it was tough. And you spend time with it. You know, first, you know, electric top, disappearing top, very cool. 13-inch wheels. That was an emphasis to get it really low. You know, Harley Earl was a very tall man, and to fit into a car this way, you'll see there's a indentation for your heel at the accelerator, just to give him a little more, get his knee a little further away from the steering wheel for a big guy. It's really special to have the car here. It's actually the only car in the show that we brought back from a lender. Everything else is our collections, but it's always great to deal with GM. They're so supportive, and they love sharing what they have in the Heritage Collection.
I'm very grateful for that. To see it in person, it's just an incredible.
It's remarkable. Yeah.
Moving forward through the eras, the next car I want to talk about is, of course, the 300 SL, the Mercedes Gullwing, one of my all-time favorite cars, and one of the most drivable classic cars. So you guys have done a lot with this car in particular. So tell me more about the adventures you guys have had.
Yeah, so we bought at RM Sotheby's at Pebble a number of years ago. The idea of using it for historic rallies, and our chairman Nick and his wife Shelley drove it in 2016 in the Mille Miglia. So we flew the car over and enjoyed that event. He's done a number of events as well, stateside. So it's done well over 4,000 miles in events since we've owned it. It's in excellent condition. Mechanically, it's very stock. We did put the sport cam in from the Roadster. It's a remarkable car. When you drive this, it drives like a modern car. You think 1955, this was a supercar. It was the fastest production car in the mid-50s that you could buy. And you drive it today, it's very well balanced, performs wonderfully. It's certainly a Grand Touring car. You can drive it all day, no trouble. Gosh, and I've driven it, I've driven it maybe over 125 miles an hour effortlessly, and I know it can go faster than that.
I totally believe it.
A really wonderful thing. This one has Rudge wheels on it, which is cool. It does have the Americanized bumpers, which I hate, but they're original to the car.
But the original to the car, yeah.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have a second one in the collection that's very low mileage. Came with the Nick Begovich collection we purchased a number of years ago. He had 14 cars. He was an engineer, so represented significant milestones in technology in cars in his collection, and the Gullwing being one of them.
Right, and it was such a pivotal car for Mercedes. This was their post-war proof to the world that Mercedes-Benz, after World War II, could make a car that was the greatest in the world. And that they put all of their nous and know-how into this car. And the six-cylinder engine that's in this car is unbelievable. It's angled over so that line could be a little bit lower. The Messerschmitt fuel injection system, all this crazy stuff in it, like you said.
Childless framework. And,
exactly.
There's so much about the car. It's it's very well appointed, even with matching luggage. So you got to have that, right?
All right. Why even have a 300 SL if you don't have matching luggage?
But what a treat it is to drive. It really is.
They're so sweet. And I was telling you as we were walking over, I see them all the time at collector car events. You see them. I just got back from Monterey. They're everywhere there, and that's because it was a very popular car for Mercedes, and it remains the icon that it was in the 50s. It's still that icon.
Absolutely. I wish it had roll-up windows, but instead of removable windows. But the aerodynamics, even in the rain with the windows out, the slipstream is such you don't really get wet. It's amazing. And the car's a little hot, no air conditioning, but what a wonderful car. What a wonderful car. Yeah.
An amazing car. You have to have one in any museum, and this is
there it is. Yeah,
a really nice one. Yeah, exactly. The next car on the list that we have to talk about is the Lamborghini Miura. Now, for a number of reasons, obviously one style, one of the most beautiful looking cars I think Lamborghini ever made.
Yeah, even today, it's timeless. Timeless design.
Especially this one, an earlier one with the eyelash headlights. It's just pure theater, but also just so beautiful.
Yeah.
But also the next thing is engineering. Obviously, this was designed by a very young team of engineers who took a whole new approach to what a Lamborghini could be. Mid-engined, transverse-mounted 12-cylinder engine. Some kind of questionable decisions sharing the engine oil and gearbox oil.
Okay.
But not everything's perfect. But this car, just incredible. I don't really think the Miura needs much of an introduction, to be honest with you.
No.
Tell me about this one specifically.
Well, this car is really special. So we acquired 14 cars from a guy named Nick Begovich, who died at the age of 96. He bought this car new, picked it up in Rome in '67. I drove around Europe. He flew it back to LA. He drove it very lightly, and it survives completely original 4,000-mile car.
Oh, you're kidding.
Original paint, original interior. It drives like a new car.
That's amazing.
So, and all the cars in his collection were like that. But this really special. I mean, of course, the Miura has really stood up the test of time from a design and engineering point of view, and this is really a superlative example of an early one.
So sticking with the theme of mid-engine cars, we now move to the Porsche 904. But this is a very, very special 904. So can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's also from the Begovich collection. So a car that Dr. Begovich bought new, drove around Europe, flew it back to LA, and drove it very lightly. It has just over 3,000 miles on it from new.
Unreal.
Never raced, all original. It is likely the most original 904 on the planet. So everyone who's interested in these cars, we get lots of questions and emails about very specific things about this car because it is so original.
It's really become a reference point for
it is.
904.
It absolutely is, and we're so happy to have it. Light recommissioning, it drives and runs really well. It just a really cool thing in the collection. the whole idea of this, we were talking about the idea of mid-engine technology that helps balance a car, makes it handle better for racing, but also an experimental fiberglass body, which Porsche only did on this car and then sort of abandoned it. They didn't quite like. And if you look at the panels, they're slightly ill-fitting now, and you can see some support structure that's sort of telegraphing through the fiberglass now from age. But nothing to be done. It's the original paint. We're not going to mess around with it.
Right. It's come this far. So.
Yeah. So
now, but it has so much character. But it's just incredible that this car is so well preserved, and to have come with the Miura from that same collection.
Yeah. So it's a really special thing for us, and we're happy to show it again in this exhibition.
Amazing car.
Yeah.
And now, following that theme of racing, we come to one of the most appealing cars, at least in my mind, from the collection. And I'm a huge Formula One fan. I'm a big Ferrari fan, and particularly the Michael Schumacher era. Now, Michael Schumacher has a tie to this car, though. He's not the main reason why it's historically important. So tell us a little bit more about this car.
So, interesting car. We bought it really because of the importance of the design, and not really thinking we were going to run it. But then we decided we really wanted to run it and get people to understand what it's all about. So, 1997, Schumacher test drove it, didn't really like the chassis on it, so went with a different setup. But his teammate Eddie Irvine did race this car in a few events, so it does have some race history. But because it was driven lightly, it's remarkably original. We were able to partner with Corsa Clienti and take it out to Sonoma to get it up and running again. It hadn't been run for about 8 years. We had a successful test run and flew it over to England to go up the hill climb at Goodwood at Festival Speed. So we've had the chance to experience the car, and of course they're remarkably complicated and interesting. The V10 is my favorite. The sound of the V10 is my favorite. Shrill.
There's no question. As a modern Formula One fan, having gone to races now, it's crazy because you can sit next to people and you can have a conversation with them. Whereas back when these cars were running, when the cars go by, you have to be something, you can't hear anything else.
That's right.
Because this engine is just so incredible. And what's interesting about this car too, there are a couple things that strike me. One is how simple the design is comparatively to cars now. This car is also very small. Modern Formula One cars have grown tremendously in length and width, just to accommodate so much more of the aerodynamics. They take up a much larger footprint. This car remains pretty small.
Right.
And just very kind of basic looking compared to cars.
It is.
But it's also interesting to me because it was just before the Ferrari dominant era in Formula One, the most recent one. Obviously, it's been a long time now since Ferrari's won a championship, but really was that marriage of Schumacher and Ferrari was about to really take off at this period of time. It was just before that.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating about this car too, like you said, when you guys took it, you explained to Goodwood, you're explaining to me that it's on rain tires now for a very specific reason. So what is that reason?
It's very simple. The rule there is you cannot preheat your tires. So everyone runs rain tires just to enable them to heat up and get traction better as you run up the hill. So it did well, over 160 miles an hour, even running at 80%. We were very happy with the performance. It's a remarkably original car, and we're sort of teetering now. To keep running it, we'd have to rebuild the motor and transmission. We also have the problem with the lifespan of the carbon fiber suspension. So at this point, it's more of a design object in the collection than it is a working car. It does run, but you have to run it with the help of Ferrari. Maybe we'll run it again some more. It has a little bit of life left in this engine and transmission. Early computer technology is really fascinating from a technological point of view.
Definitely.
And in period, you see Schumacher carrying around this red purse. It wasn't a purse. It was the steering wheel to the car, the brain of the car, which he kept with him at all times.
Like the nuclear codes.
So it's fascinating to see that. It's a really special car to have in the collection. We do have a number of race cars, and we do try to run them all. Not being familiar with pit crew methodology for Formula One, very complicated car to operate. It takes a team of 5 or 6 guys just to keep it, external oil heater, fuel pumps, all the stands. We have everything for the car, so we can run it, but it's incredibly complicated, but fun.
Definitely a lot of fun. But the F1 car isn't the only Ferrari that's located here at the Audrain. We're standing next to this, which is one of my personal childhood icons. The Ferrari Enzo. Growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, when this car came out, it was such an incredible departure. So tell me more specifically about this one. It's unique mostly because of its color.
So it is a poster car of your childhood, I'm
Definitely.
sure. Yeah, I mean, in black, it does look a little sinister. Only 8 were painted black. Half of those came to the States, so fairly unusual to see one in black. Interesting move in technology. The car, just empirically, I've had the opportunity to drive our F40 and this back to back lightly on the road. This car is much more compliant. When you're in the F40, you know you're in a race car. This feels like a road-going car. It's a car you could drive all day long. The F40 I don't think is like that. So
no, the F40 was a leap in terms of technology in that it got to 200 miles an hour. That was the big thing. It crested that barrier. It was a huge deal. But the F50 that came after it employed a lot more Formula One based technology for the road. The transmission was a little bit more the chassis, all those things. And then this car came along and took it even further. Obviously, either the flappy paddle gearbox was now the standard, and that made its entry into this car.
Right.
But additionally, to me, what's the most important thing about this one, particularly of the Enzo, is the engine.
Yeah.
Because this engine became the basis for then the Ferrari V12s that are used today. It was used in this car, it was in the 599, it was in the F12, and then it was finally in the 812. It was been in all of those cars, so it really was the last iteration of the V12 for Ferrari, and they just massaged this engine and did refinements over time. But this historically speaking, is a very, very important engine for Ferrari. Yeah. And additionally, this car is just bonkers. The styling still, I think, it's hard to believe this car is 20 years old now. You could roll this shape out today and it would still look modern and elegant and insane. Yeah. That's what the Enzo is all about. It's just such a special car.
Yeah, and it was fun when we had the F1 at Sonoma doing our test driving during the Corsa Clanti days there. There were a number of FXXs out on the track as well. It was really fun to see the race version of this and to see our F1 with the FXXs on the same track the same day was really fun to see. Yeah.
That's what an amazing day. But anytime we get to see an Enzo, it's a special day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll take the standard road version.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
I'm with you.
And the last car I want to talk about here at the museum is this, the Bugatti Veyron. For me, growing up, and this is something I talk about with Doug all the time, this car is unbelievably historically important. This truly, for me, might be the most important car historically of my lifetime because it comes to the kind of the end of what we can do with an internal combustion engine. Obviously, this and the Chiron are kind of the end as we were talking about earlier. But additionally, this is a Concorde moment. And it was such a big deal. Everybody knew about this car. They knew the stats from watching it on Top Gear. It could do 253 miles an hour. Yeah. Tires run out in 12 minutes, but the fuel run out in 10. And all of these incredible feats this car accomplished. And for me, it's one of the most historically important cars. But the reason I want to talk about it last is it bookends the two cars we were talking about. We were talking about the Marmon, the 16-cylinder engine in its time coming out when it did. Yeah. Veyron, 16-cylinder engine, again, kind of the height of engineering and excess at its time. So tell me a little bit more about this Veyron specific.
Yeah, obviously a remarkable feat in engineering. And I do think of it as that bookmark. We're getting very near the end of what a combustion engine can do. This is near the end of that. The Grand Sport, the late production Veyrons like this one, have 150 or 200 extra horsepower than the earlier version, which is crazy in itself. This also has a glass top, removable glass top. And actually this car, which is one of one, the paint scheme, if you see this online, you know it's this car because this is the only one painted like this. It held the world speed record for a convertible for a number of months at over 250 miles an hour when it was new. So that's a cool thing too about this car. Yeah. We've had it on the track, we drive around town. It's a very compliant car, with a luxury interior. You really have a sense that it's special. Even driving around town, of course, when you get on the open road and you get up to 5,000 RPMs and the turbochargers spool on, you realize you're in a rocket ship, and that's that's the real experience of these cars.
Absolutely, that's the blend. Is like it has this monstrous performance, and there are lots of companies that make fast cars, but there are very few that couple the luxury of a Bentley interior, as you described it, and the compliancy of a car that you can put and just drive and just use as a normal car effectively. Yeah. But the second you breathe on it, you better make sure you've got some room because. It's an overtaking weapon. I can only imagine on the highway what this thing is like. It's just such a special car, and I think it encapsulates everything at this collection perfectly. You have such a blend of vintage and pre-war cars, and then it comes through race cars and modern stuff. It's so cool.
An embarrassment of riches. We're really, really grateful to have cars from the 1890s right up to modern-day supercars and everything in between, and really the same in motorcycles. So it's an easy collection to show because everything is really good.
Everything.
And we have a great space. So the fun part is doing it thematically and doing these 12-week shows and turning it over 4 times a year. So our members. We have almost 1,500 members now. It gives them a good reason to come back quarterly to see a new show. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing such a wonderful job spending time with me, walking me through this collection.
What a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And speaking of club members, I'm going to go check out your Clubhouse now just to take a look and see what's there.
Please do.
But thank you again for all of this. It's an amazing facility you have here, and I just had a blast. This is so much fun.
Yeah, well, I hope you come back for Motor Week next week. And
I'll come back. I will definitely
If not, please you come back. A new show in hand. So.
Well, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And now we're at the Audrain Motorsport Clubhouse. Now this is another facility that the museum has that isn't the museum so much itself. It has cars that are not currently on exhibition at the museum, but they also have a place where people can come and hang out, and you can be a member and join this and come spend time in this beautiful space. And while there's lots of cool stuff, including a library that has lots of automotive literature, the big thing to talk about, of course, are the cars here. So I wanted to focus on a couple of cars that they have currently in the facility. And here they are, the Mercedes CLKs, but they're very special ones. Now, I've always loved the CLK because it spans the gamut of Mercedes, unlike any other model. You can get a base CLK 320 all the way up to the insane CLK GTR from the 1990s, but these two are very special. This one, of course, is a CLK 63 Black Series, and it was the first Black Series model that was sold in the United States. And it was a pumped up, more focused version of the CLK. It got the 6.2 liter naturally aspirated V8, and it's a monster in its own right. But to this side of me is the CLK DTM. It's basically the even more special version of the special version of the CLK. They only made 100 of these, and they're just an extremely rare sight. They added acres of carbon fiber to this, even more crazy styling for aerodynamic purposes, and it's a ridiculous car. And honestly, I'm not starstruck often by being around cars, but this one blew my mind to walk in here and see it. You never see CLK DTMs, and it's a real privilege and something I definitely wanted to highlight in here. Now, if you're a Top Gear fan like me, you know exactly what this is. This is a Peel. It is an incredibly small car, the absolute definition of a microcar. One of my favorite things about it, though, is it's got this handle located on the back of it, and if you just lean down, you can pick up the whole car. I've never been able to pick up a car before, but it's hilarious. And of course, this car is very famous from when Jeremy Clarkson drove it, in a special way he drove it through an office and all kinds of crazy things. But to see one in person, this is the only one I've ever seen, is striking. Tiny is an understatement. Looking at it, it's so narrow. It's just minuscule, but it puts a smile on my face, and I can definitely see why it belongs in a collection like this. Such a hilarious car. And that is the Audrain Automotive Museum here in Newport, Rhode Island. Although I can't attend the Young Timers event coming up, I'm so glad that I finally got to tour this facility because it's truly amazing. And if you're ever in Newport, well, you have to come and check it out. A link to the Audrain Auto Museum's website will be in the description below, and truly, it's a wonderful place to come and see. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon. Goodbye.